The garbage bag hit me before her fist did. It slammed into my chest hard enough to knock me backward. My shoes spilled across the marble floor. A framed photograph shattered beside my feet. The photograph showed my wife. She'd been dead for 11 years. My daughter-in-law looked at the broken glass and laughed, actually laughed. Then she pointed toward the front door. "Take your trash and get out." 3 housekeepers stood frozen in the hallway. A maintenance supervisor had stopped carrying a ladder. 2 residents waiting for the elevator were openly staring. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke, because everyone knew something was wrong. Very wrong. I bent down, picked up the photograph, brushed a piece of glass from my wife's face, and that's when Danielle punched me. Not a slap, not a shove. A punch, straight into my jaw. The entire hallway gasped, "Go live in the gutters like you deserve." She said it loudly, loud enough for everyone to hear. That was important to Danielle. Everything was a performance. Every insult needed an audience. Every humiliation needed witnesses. I slowly looked toward my son, expecting shock, expecting anger, expecting something, anything. Instead, Brandon looked away. That hurt more than the punch. "My name is Victor Hale. I'm 72 years old, and according to my daughter-in-law, I was a useless old parasite living off my son's success. Interesting theory, considering my son was currently living off mine. The funny thing? Danielle genuinely believed Brandon owned everything. The penthouse, the cars, the memberships, the lifestyle, the reputation, all of it. She believed it because Brandon never corrected her for 3 years. But this story isn't about hidden ownership. It isn't about inheritance. And it isn't about a secret millionaire reveal. Because the real disaster started 6 months earlier. I owned one of the largest private concierge firms in the country. Not glamorous work, not famous work, but powerful. My company handled private travel, executive security, luxury events, political fundraisers, celebrity logistics, and corporate retreats. When extremely important people needed something impossible done, they called us. 3 years earlier, I retired. Brandon became CEO, or at least that was the public story. The private reality was different, very different. I spent 38 years building relationships, not contracts. Relationships, presidents, governors, athletes, billionaires, media executives, family office managers. People who could make a phone call and move markets. People Brandon had never met. Then Danielle arrived, and suddenly my experience became a problem. My advice became interference. My presence became embarrassing. She hated one thing more than anything else: the fact that people still called me first. Not Brandon, me. At charity galas, people walked past him to shake my hand at conferences. Executives asked whether I'd be attending before confirming their reservations. At business dinners, clients wanted me at the table, not because I demanded attention, because I'd known many of them for decades. Danielle couldn't stand it. Every compliment directed at me felt like an insult to her. Every old friendship looked like competition. Every relationship looked like power she didn't control. 6 months before the punch, she made a decision, a catastrophic decision. Without telling Brandon, she started interfering with company relationships, replacing vendors, canceling meetings, ignoring longtime clients, pliving out senior employees, hiring her friends, spending money like water, acting like she already owned the empire. At first, nobody told me. People were trying to protect Brandon. Then the resignations started. Then contracts started disappearing. Then clients started quietly leaving, one by one, without drama, without warnings, without speeches, just gone. The board became nervous. Investors became nervous. Banks became nervous. Everybody became nervous except Danielle. She thought criticism meant jealousy. That's usually how arrogant people interpret reality. Then 3 weeks ago, I received a phone call, a very interesting phone call, one that changed everything. The chairman of our largest client asked a simple question. "Victor, when exactly did you stop running the company?" I already knew that wasn't really a question, it was a warning. The chairman continued, "Because if this is the future, we're leaving." And they weren't the only ones, not even close. Standing in that hallway with a bleeding jaw, looking at my broken photo, watching Danielle smile, I suddenly realized something. She thought she was throwing an old man out of a penthouse. What she was actually doing was forcing the last person protecting her from reality to walk away. And when reality finally arrived, it wasn't coming through my front door, it was coming through Brandon's boardroom door. Danielle thought she won. That was the dangerous part. People make their worst decisions after they convince themselves they've already won. I spent that night in a hotel overlooking the river, not because I had nowhere else to go, because I wanted silence, the kind of silence that only comes when disappointment finally burns itself out. Around midnight, my phone started vibrating. Former employees, current employees, clients, BIDE members, people who had heard what happened. Apparently, news travels fast when someone punches a 72-year-old founder in front of half a luxury residential tower. I ignored every call, every single one. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I walked into company headquarters, not as chairman, not as founder, just as a visitor. The receptionist nearly cried when she saw me. That told me more than any financial report. Healthy companies don't look relieved when retired founders walk through the door. Desperate companies do. I took the elevator to the executive floor. The atmosphere felt wrong. The energy felt wrong. People stopped talking when I passed. Managers avoided eye contact. Assistants looked exhausted. Nobody looked happy. Then I reached the boardroom and heard shouting, "Danielle, of course." Through the glass walls, I watched her screaming at 3 senior executives. One of them had worked with me for 26 years. Another had helped build the company from 80 employees to 2,000. The third was preparing to resign. I could tell immediately. People have resignation faces. Danielle slammed a folder onto the table. "If you're not loyal to Brandon, then leave." The room went silent. Then the oldest executive stood up, slowly, calmly, dangerously calm. "I think I will." He removed his company badge, placed it on the table, and walked out. Danielle looked pleased, actually pleased, like she'd won another battle. Then a second executive stood, then a third. 3 resignations in under 60 seconds, and Danielle was too arrogant to understand what she'd just witnessed. I stepped away before she saw me. There was nothing left to learn. The damage was already obvious. At noon, I received another phone call. This one mattered a lot. The caller was Arthur Baines, chairman of the largest hospitality group in North America. For 20 years, his company had been one of our biggest clients, a relationship worth hundreds of millions. Victor. His voice sounded disappointed, never a good sign. I heard what happened, so did everyone else. Silence. Then he asked, "Are you still involved?" Interesting question. The second warning in 3 weeks. "No, I stepped away years ago." Another silence, longer this time. "Then we're terminating everything." Just like that, 20 years gone in one sentence. I thanked him for his honesty, then ended the call. No arguing, no begging, no negotiations, because I knew Arthur. His decision had already been made. An hour later, another client left, then another, then another. The avalanche had started. By Thursday morning, the stockholders demanded an emergency board meeting. By Thursday afternoon, the banks demanded updated financial reports. By Thursday evening, industry blogs were reporting executive departures. Meanwhile, Danielle was posting vacation photographs on social media, smiling, drinking champagne, showing off designer handbags, pretending nothing was happening. People like Danielle always mistake silence for safety. They think because nobody is yelling, nobody is moving. They're usually wrong. Friday morning, 8:04 a.m. My son finally appeared at my hotel room. I opened the door and almost didn't recognize him. 3 days. That's all it took. 3 days. His suit was wrinkled. His eyes were bloodshot. His face looked 10 years older. "Dad." I said nothing. He walked inside, sat down, and buried his face in his hands. For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "They won't stop leaving. Not investors, not employees, not clients, people, relationships, trust, confidence, everything I'd spent 4 decades building." And suddenly I realized something. Brandon still thought this was a business crisis. It wasn't. Businesses survive bad quarters. Businesses survive mistakes. Businesses survive incompetent leadership. What they don't survive is becoming untrustworthy. I looked at my son, really looked at him. Then I asked the question I'd been holding back for years. Why did you let her hit me? His head dropped lower, much lower, and for the first time, I saw genuine shame, the kind that can't be explained away, the kind that keeps people awake at night. But before he could answer, my phone rang. The screen displayed a name I hadn't seen in months, a name that made my stomach tighten immediately. The chairman of the board. Calls from board chairman on Friday mornings are rarely good news. I answered, listened, said only 3 words. I understand completely. Then I ended the call. Brandon stared at me. What happened? I looked directly into his eyes, and for the first time in his life, my son looked afraid of the answer. The board isn't trying to save your position anymore. I paused. They're trying to save the company from you. The board meeting started at 9. By 9:07, my son's career was already over. He just didn't know it yet. I wasn't in the room. I wasn't even in the building. The board had invited me. I declined. This wasn't my fight anymore. The company belonged to Brandon now. Consequences belonged to him too. Around 10:30, my phone rang. One of the directors, a man I'd known for 25 years. Victor. His voice sounded exhausted. That bad? Worse. Interesting. Apparently Brandon walked into the meeting believing he could explain everything. The client departures, the resignations, the financial losses, the public embarrassment, the collapsing confidence. The board listened intently, professionally. Then they started asking questions, very specific questions. Questions about Danielle, questions about hiring decisions, questions about spending, questions about interference, questions about complaints, questions about warnings, questions Brandon had ignored. The meeting became ugly, fast. Not because Brandon lied, because he couldn't. The documentation was overwhelming. memos, reports, internal audits, exat interviews, everything, years of everything. By 11 o'clock, one director finally asked the question nobody wanted to ask. Are you running the company, or is your wife? Silence, Dobsimilt, silence. Nobody needed an answer. The room already had one. At noon, the vote happened, unanimous. Not a single director supported him. Not one. The board removed Brandon as CEO, effective immediately. 41 years old, removed from the company his father built, not because he wasn't intelligent, not because he wasn't talented, because he allowed loyalty to the wrong person to become more important than responsibility. The board appointed an interim executive. Emergency measures followed. Crisis teams arrived. Consultants arrived. Lawyers arrived. Meanwhile, Danielle was still posting photographs online. A spa, a champagne brunch, a shopping trip. Completely unaware her husband's world had collapsed. The call came at 3:17. Brandon, I answered, didn't speak, just listened. He sounded broken, not angry, broken. They fired me. No father enjoys hearing that, no matter the circumstances. For a few seconds, I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered the hallway, the punch, the broken photograph, the silence. His silence. Sympathy has limits. What are you going to do now? I asked. I don't know. For the first time in years, that answer was honest. Then another problem appeared, a much bigger one. At 5:42, I received a call from the company's chief legal officer. That man never called me unless something was burning. Victor, what's wrong? Long pause. Then he said something that made me sit upright. We found the contracts. What contracts? The ones Danielle signed. My stomach tightened immediately, because Danielle loves signing things, approving things, changing things, controlling things. And people who love power often leave paperwork behind. Lots of paperwork. The legal officer sounded stunned. Victor, I don't think Brandon understands how serious this is. That sentence worried me a lot. Then he explained. Over the previous 18 months, Danielle had pressured vendors, threatened contractors, manipulated negotiations, altered service agreements, approved questionable payments, authorized consulting arrangements involving her friends. Millions of dollars, millions. some of it unethical, some of it reckless, some of it potentially illegal, and almost all of it carried one signature, not Danielle's, Brandon's, because he signed whatever she placed in front of him, without reading, without questioning, without thinking. I closed my eyes. 40 years building a company, died by laziness and ego, an ugly combination. That evening, Brandon arrived at the hotel again, this time alone, no suit, no confidence, no excuses. Just a man who suddenly understood how much damage had been done. He sat across from me staring at the floor, then quietly asked, "Dad, did you know this would happen?" I thought about that question, longer than he expected. Finally, I answered, "No, I knew she'd hurt you. I didn't know she'd destroy you." The truth hit harder than any insult. I watched it happen, right across his face. Then he asked something even worse. "Can it be fixed?" I looked out the hotel window, at the city skyline, at the company logo visible on one of the towers, at 40 years of my life, and for the first time, I honestly didn't know the answer, because the next morning, federal investigators were scheduled to arrive, and when they finished reviewing Danielle's contracts, the company would no longer be the biggest thing Brandon had to worry about. Federal investigators arrived at 8:01 a.m., not lawyers, not consultants, not auditors, investigators. There's a difference. Lawyers look for arguments, auditors look for mistakes, investigators look for evidence, and evidence doesn't care about excuses. By noon, 3 floors of company headquarters had been sealed. Employees were escorted from offices, servers were copied, records were secured, laptops disappeared into evidence cases. The news spread through the city like wildfire, not because reporters knew everything, because powerful people suddenly stopped returning calls. That always means something is wrong. Brandon called me 4 times. I didn't answer. The 5th time, I did. "Dad." His voice sounded hollow. They think I knew. I closed my eyes, because I already knew that part. When signatures appear on contracts, people assume the signer read them. When approvals appear on payments, people assume the approver understood them. When authority exists, responsibility follows. Fair or unfair. That's reality. I never stole anything. I know. I never took a dollar. I know. Then came the sentence that finally revealed the truth. I trusted her. There it was, the most expensive sentence in his life. Trust without verification, authority without oversight, leadership without accountability, a disaster disguised as loyalty. 3 weeks later, the investigation expanded, then expanded again, then expanded again. Every new discovery seemed connected to Danielle. Every trail led back to Danielle. Every missing dollar seemed to pass through someone Danielle knew. Friends, consultants, influencers, advisors, lifestyle managers, people who appeared from nowhere and somehow became wealthy. Then came the arrest. Not dramatic, not cinematic, not on television. A parking garage. 7:43 a.m., 2 investigators, 1 warrant, 1 pair of handcuffs, and suddenly the woman who believed she controlled everything, controlled absolutely nothing. The newspapers had a field day, but honestly, the headlines weren't the worst part. The worst part was what happened afterward. Nobody called her, nobody defended her, nobody stood beside her, nobody volunteered explanations. The same social circle she'd spent years cultivating vanished overnight. Funny how quickly opportunists disappear when opportunity disappears. As for Brandon, the board offered him a choice: resign quietly or be publicly terminated. He resigned. The company survived, barely. New leadership arrived. Clients slowly returned. Employees stopped leaving. Confidence returned one careful step at a time. Recovery took years, not months, years. One afternoon, nearly 18 months later, I received a knock at my door. Brandon. He looked different, not older, lighter. The arrogance was gone, the entitlement was gone, the excuses were gone. For the first time since he was a young man, he looked honest. We sat on the balcony overlooking the city, neither speaking for a while. Then he handed me something, a photograph. The photograph Danielle had shattered, the one of my wife. Restored, professionally repaired, beautifully framed. I stared at it for a long time, found the original negative. His voice was quiet. Took months. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Then he surprised me. He stood, looked directly at me, and said, "I didn't fail because of her." Interesting. Very interesting. Because that wasn't what I expected, he continued. I failed because every time I saw something wrong, I chose comfort over courage. The city skyline reflected in the glass behind him. I blamed her for years. But every signature was mine. I let it happen. For the first time since all this began, I felt proud of him, not because he succeeded, not because he recovered, not because he rebuilt his life, because he finally accepted responsibility. Most people never do. A few months later, I attended the company's 40th anniversary celebration, not as founder, not as chairman, not as a guest of honor, just an old man sitting quietly near the back. The new CEO delivered a speech. Employees applauded, clients applauded, investors applauded. Then the CEO unexpectedly pointed toward me. The greatest lesson this company ever learned wasn't how to build success. The room became silent. It was how quickly success dies when character disappears. Hundreds of people stood, applauding, and for a brief moment, I thought about the hallway, the garbage bags, the punch, the broken photograph, the humiliation. Danielle believed that day was my downfall. It wasn't. It was simply the day everyone finally revealed who they really were. And once the masks came off, reality did the rest.